They say, love makes you blind, but I never imagined it could also make you lose everything you ever believed in. My name is Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, I thought I had the perfect family, a loving father, a devoted mother, and a home that seemed wrapped in endless warmth, nestled on the quiet streets of Maplewood Hills. We weren't rich in gold or glittering luxuries, but rich in laughter, respect, and the kind of love that felt unshakable. My father, Gregory, was my hero. To everyone in Maplewood, he was that man, confident, successful, and impossible not to admire. He carried himself with a presence that made people listen, not with arrogance, but with quiet authority. His reputation spread far beyond our town. People trusted him, respected him, even envied him. And me, I wanted to be exactly like him. When I was a boy of 12, I would sit on the edge of his mahogany desk while he worked late into the night in our home study. He'd glance up from his papers, ruffle my hair, and say with that calm, assured smile, "Success, Ethan, isn't measured by money. It's measured by character and how you treat people." I hung on every word, every sentence etched into my mind as though it were a sacred truth. He taught me how to shake hands with confidence, how to face failure with dignity, and how to treat others with respect, no matter their status or station. But perhaps he never thought to teach me one of life's harshest lessons, how to recognize betrayal, especially when it comes wrapped in the face of someone you love. Because betrayal doesn't announce itself. It slips in quietly, then shatters everything you hold dear. It all began 3 years ago, on a crisp autumn morning that smelled faintly of rain and fallen maple leaves. I was standing on the balcony of my Riverview City apartment, holding a cup of cold coffee, the steam long gone in the chill of dawn. Below, the city stirred slowly, the streets wet and glimmering, taxis weaving like miniature rivers of yellow in the morning light. My phone buzzed, an invitation to a design expo downtown at the Riverview Convention Center. Back then, I was a 26-year-old architect, fresh out of college, brimming with ambition, and determined to carve a place for myself in the world. That expo was my first real opportunity to present my work publicly, to let people see the buildings and spaces I had poured my soul into. I had stayed up for nights on end, hands raw from sketching, eyes tired from staring at models, mind replaying every angle, every measurement, every shadow. I wanted perfection. And then I saw her, Lila. She walked in wearing a light beige coat, her chestnut hair tied loosely, eyes brimming with curiosity and something I couldn't yet define. She paused at my booth, her gaze scanning my designs as though she were reading a story hidden within them. "This one feels alive," she said softly, almost reverently. I laughed nervously. Alive, that's a first. Her smile was gentle, like sunlight slipping through a window in winter. And in that moment, everything slowed. Her voice had a melody I didn't want to forget. That was the beginning. We talked for hours that day about architecture, about dreams, about the invisible threads that connect design to emotion. She told me she worked as an interior designer for a boutique firm in Riverview. I told her about my dream, to build homes and spaces that weren't just functional, but alive with feeling, spaces that could cradle memories, laughter, and comfort. She nodded, her eyes glowing, understanding in a way that felt rare. Something about her drew me in, warmth, kindness, and a quiet intensity I had never encountered before. After that day, our meetings multiplied. Coffee at Cedar Street Cafe, dinners at Brookfield Bistro, night drives along the Riverview riverfront, where the city lights shimmered in the water like stars that had fallen from the sky. Each encounter deepened my certainty. Leela wasn't merely someone I liked, she was someone I needed. I still remember the night I proposed. Willow Creek Park, empty, except for the rustling leaves and the distant hum of the city. The stars were scattered across the sky, the world suspended in that one breath of time. She gasped at the ring. Her hands shook. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. I believed that moment would last forever. I believed in us, but forever had an expiry date I could never have foreseen. A few months after our engagement, Leela started spending more time with my family. At first, I was overjoyed. Seeing her laugh with my parents, help in the kitchen, share stories over dinner, it made me proud. She and my father, Gregory, grew close quickly, talking about art, travel, architecture, and business ventures. And why wouldn't they? My father had that effect. He could charm anyone, make them feel understood, appreciated, special. But slowly, A subtle unease began to creep into my chest. It started in tiny increments. How Leela's eyes seemed to light up more when Dad walked into a room. How she laughed more at his jokes than mine. How his compliments, once warm and fatherly, began to carry a weight I couldn't place, a subtle undertone that made my stomach twist. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. After all, this was my father, the man who had taught me so much about life, honor, and love. How could I even imagine he could betray me? Then one night, Lila said something that pierced me like a cold blade. "Your dad invited me to a charity gala next week. You should come to—" I froze. "He invited you?" "Yes," she said, her smile radiant. "He said I'd enjoy meeting some of his business friends." I wanted to ask why he hadn't invited me himself, but her excitement was so pure, so sincere, that I forced a smile and nodded. "Sure, we'll go." The night of the gala felt different from the start. From the balcony of the grand ballroom, I watched as my father guided Leela through the crowd, hand lightly on her back, introducing her to influential people, not as his son's fiancée, but as if she were his own companion. She laughed at his jokes with a familiarity she had never shown me. Her glow was brighter under his attention, and in that moment, I felt invisible in my own life. After that night, a shadow fell over us. Leela became distant, distracted, her phone always in her hand. "Work stuff," she said when I asked. But sometimes, when she passed me in the hallway, I caught the faint trace of Gregory's cologne mixed with hers. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to ignore it. But ignoring it didn't stop the gnawing truth from forming in my chest. Then one night, my mother, Claire, came to my apartment. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying quietly for hours. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I think there's something you need to know." My chest tightened. My stomach dropped. "I saw them," she said finally, "your father and Lila at a cafe in Harborview Plaza, their hands almost touching." I wanted to scream. "Mom, you must be mistaken, Dad." He would never. She shook her head. "I hope I'm wrong, Ethan. I truly do." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every laugh, every glance, every conversation, every quiet touch. The pieces began to shift into a pattern I had refused to see, and the image they formed made my chest ache unbearably. A week later, I followed them. Lila claimed she was meeting a client, but I trusted nothing. I parked a block away from Harborview Plaza, heart hammering, fingers gripping the steering wheel. When they entered the cafe together, my world stopped. There was my father, smiling, calm, completely unbothered. And Leela, her smile mirrored his, warm and comfortable. Their hands met across the table, subtle but deliberate. And the first, the son, the fiancé, the boy who had loved them both, felt shattered. I didn't confront them. I just sat in my car, hands trembling, tears sliding down my cheeks as the two people I trusted most destroyed me quietly. Later, I called Lila. "Ethan, please, it's not what you think." It was exactly what I thought. The next morning, I faced my father in our Maplewood Hill study. Sunlight poured over his desk, glinting off the polished surface. He looked calm, almost peaceful, as if nothing had happened. "Dad," I said, my voice tight, controlled, standing at the doorway. "Ethan, you look terrible. Sit down." I didn't move. Instead, I asked softly, "How long?" "How long? What?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "Don't do that, Dad. Don't pretend." "I saw you with Leela." He sighed, leaned back, and said slowly, "Ethan, you're young. One day, you'll understand that love can be complicated." "Complicated?" I snapped. "You betrayed me." "She was my fiancée." He looked at me, not with guilt, but with pity. "You and Leela were never meant to last. She needs stability, someone who can give her security. Someone like you." I whispered, voice tight with anger. He said nothing. That silence spoke louder than words. My chest tightened, fire rising inside me. "You taught me to be honest, to protect what's mine." Was that all just a lie? "Ethan, I didn't plan this. It just happened. It just happened." I hissed like rain. "Like traffic. You don't just fall for your son's fiancée, Dad." He said nothing. That moment, something inside me fractured completely. That evening, I called Leela. Her voice shook, fragile and uncertain. "Ethan, I was going to tell you. When I asked quietly, each word heavy with betrayal, before or after you moved into his life. She began crying. I didn't mean for it to happen. But your father. He makes me feel safe. Safe. That word sliced through me like glass. Every fiber of my being felt like it was unraveling, because all I had ever wanted in my life was to make her feel exactly that, to be her anchor, her protector, her home. And yet, in one cruel twist, he had stolen it from me. The days that followed blurred into an endless haze. I walked through our apartment, surrounded by silence that felt deafening. Every photograph, every coffee mug, every little trace of her presence echoed with memories that now felt poisoned. When she came to collect her things, I didn't speak. I didn't want to. Her tears streaked her cheeks as she whispered, "Ethan, please believe me, I never wanted to hurt you." I nodded, my throat tight. "Then why did you—" She had no answer. Tears could not undo betrayal, and I learned painfully that sometimes love isn't enough to keep people honest. Within weeks, she was gone. My father and Leela began appearing in public dinners, gala events, charity functions, the same venues where I had once stood beside her, proud and in love. People whispered. Neighbors avoided eye contact. And my mother, she couldn't bear it. I'll never forget the night she left. Claire stood at the doorway, suitcase in hand, her eyes glistening in the dim light of our hallway. "I can't stay here anymore, Ethan. He's not the man I married." I hugged her, holding her as tightly as I could. For the first time in years, she felt small, fragile, like a bird caught in a storm. When the door closed behind her, the house fell silent. Empty rooms echoed with laughter that no longer existed. Their laughter, her laughter. I quit my job soon after. I couldn't focus. The blueprints, the models, the meetings, they became meaningless. Friends called, concerned, but I stopped answering. I drifted through life, surviving but not truly living. I felt invisible, trapped in a city that had become a mausoleum of memories. And yet, life has a way of quietly rebuilding you, piece by piece, even when you think it's impossible. 2 years later, I returned. Not to reconcile, not to seek approval. I returned to claim my life. Time had changed me. The boy who had been heartbroken. In his place stood a man calm, focused, and dangerous in his silence. By then, my father's empire had expanded beyond what I had ever imagined. And beside him, always smiling, ever graceful, was Lila. They were the city's golden couple. Power and elegance personified. But I knew what they were really built on: lies. I began quietly, subtly, using old contacts, friends still loyal to me in the business world, and meticulous research. I traced everything: accounts, contracts, transfers, and whispers of corruption. What I discovered was worse than I imagined. My father's empire wasn't just shiny on the outside. Inside, it was rotten. Fraud, bribes, shell companies, falsified records. And Lila, she had been complicit, managing accounts, moving funds, smiling her way through deception. For months, I collected evidence. Every transaction, every memo, every secret email. I didn't want revenge through force or violence. I wanted truth to dismantle them. Because truth, when revealed, has a weight no lie can survive. I leaked small pieces to journalists, auditors, and investors, slowly, like a storm gathering strength. Rumors became whispers. Whispers became headlines. Gregory Weston, under investigation. Maplewood Architectural Empire faces financial fraud allegations. I watched from the shadows as panic began to seep into their polished lives. The smiles tightened. The eyes that once sparkled in confidence now darted with fear. Then one evening, Lila called me. Her voice trembled, barely a whisper. "Ethan, are you behind this?" I paused, letting silence stretch like a blade across the line. "Behind what, Lila?" "The truth," I said softly. She broke down. "Please, you don't understand." "I didn't mean for any of this." I cut her off. "No, Lila, you don't understand. Every action has consequences. You thought you could play your games and never pay the price." Weeks later, it all came crashing down. Bank accounts frozen. Contracts canceled. The man who had once ruled half the city now had nothing. My father lost everything: his empire, his mansion, his reputation. And Leela, when the money vanished, so did her love. She abandoned him as effortlessly as she had abandoned me. For the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. It was a cold, gray morning when I saw him again. 2 years had passed since the empire fell. I found him alone on a park bench we had often visited when I was a boy. He looked smaller somehow, older, fragile. The man who had commanded boardrooms now seemed like a shadow, searching for fragments of a past that had crumbled. "Ethan," he whispered, the effort in his voice almost painful. I stood before him in silence, the autumn wind rustling the dying leaves around us. For a moment, nothing passed between us except the sound of distant children laughing, blissfully unaware of the cruelty the world could harbor. "You did this," he said at last, voice trembling. I didn't respond immediately. I simply looked at him, eyes calm. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. He lowered his eyes, shame and defeat etched into every line of his face. "I've lost everything. The company, the house, even Leela. She left when the money vanished." I didn't answer. I already knew. Lila never loved him. She loved the power, the security, the image. "Do you hate me that much?" he asked finally, his voice small. I shook my head. "No, hate gives power. I don't feel anything for you anymore. Nothing." That silence crushed him more than any punishment could. After a long pause, I sat beside him. Together, we watched the children play in the distance, their laughter unburdened and pure. "Do you remember when you taught me to ride a bike right here?" I asked softly. "You said, 'When you fall, son, don't cry, just stand up and keep going.'" He smiled faintly, eyes glassy. "I remember." "Well," I said quietly, "I fell, Dad, because of you, but I did stand up again." Nothing more needed to be said. The sun began to set, casting golden light over the park, turning every leaf into fire. I stood, walking away not with anger, not with regret, but with a quiet, profound peace. I didn't look back. Not once. Months passed. Slowly, life began to make sense again. I rebuilt my firm from scratch. Honest work, careful projects, integrity as my foundation. Every small success, every satisfied client was a quiet victory. I thrived, not on revenge, but on proving that life could be rebuilt with honesty and strength. Sometimes I saw Leela's name in the news. She lived in another city now, working quietly at a small design firm. Older, quieter, shadows in her eyes where laughter had once been. And my father. He lived alone in a modest apartment overlooking the harbor, a pale echo of his former self. Our conversations were occasional, polite, distant, weather, fragments of a life that no longer existed. One evening, watching the sunset from my office window, I realized something profound. All the revenge, all the pain, was never really about them. It was about me. It was about learning that no matter who betrays you, a lover, a friend, even your own blood, you must never let their darkness become yours. Because revenge might give satisfaction for a moment, but peace gives strength forever. And peace comes only when you let go. Not to excuse what they did, but to free yourself from the chains of their choices. That night, I returned to the park one last time. The air was crisp, the stars scattered like distant memories across the sky. I sat on that old bench and whispered to myself, I lost love. I lost family. But I found myself, and for the first time in years, I smiled, not because I had one, not because they had lost, but because I had finally healed.